My name is David, and I still don't know why we decided to enter the Amazon forest. My wife, Sona, and our three friends, Mark, Daniel, and Ryan, had planned the trip as an adventure we would remember forever. We wanted to spend a few nights deep in the forest, far away from cities, phones, traffic, and everything familiar. We hired an experienced local guide to take us near a remote section of the forest, but after reaching the edge of the jungle, he refused to continue. He told us that the deeper part was different. I laughed and asked him what he meant. He simply looked at the trees and said, "The forest remembers people who enter it." We thought he was trying to scare us, so we continued without him. By late afternoon, we found a small clearing beside a narrow river and decided to make camp. The forest around us was enormous. Trees rose higher than anything I had ever seen, their branches forming a dark ceiling above us. Strange sounds came from every direction, but whenever we looked toward them, everything became silent. That first evening, Sona noticed something carved into a tree near our camp. It looked like a circle surrounded by several strange lines. Daniel said it was probably an old tribal marking. Nobody thought much about it. After dinner, we sat around the fire and talked. Suddenly, we heard footsteps somewhere beyond the trees. They were slow and heavy. Everyone stopped talking. "Probably an animal," Mark said. We listened. The footsteps stopped. Then we heard another sound, a quiet whisper. It sounded like someone saying my name. "David," I stood up immediately. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Everyone nodded. Ryan pointed his flashlight toward the darkness, but the beam revealed nothing. We decided to ignore it. Around midnight, everyone went into the tents. Sona and I were lying together when we heard something scratching the outside of our tent. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Sona grabbed my arm. "David, what's that?" I whispered that it was probably an animal. Then the scratching stopped. A few seconds later, someone whispered directly outside the tent, "Let me in." I stopped breathing. The voice sounded exactly like Sona. But Sona was beside me. She heard it too. Neither of us moved. The voice came again. "David, open the tent." I whispered, "Don't answer." Suddenly, the tent shook violently. Sona covered her ears. We stayed completely still until morning. When the sun finally rose, we rushed outside. Mark and Ryan were already awake. Their tent had strange marks across the fabric, as if something had dragged its fingers over it. Daniel was missing. We shouted his name repeatedly, but there was no answer. Then we noticed footprints leading from his tent into the forest. They looked like human footprints, but they were unusually long and narrow. We followed them for several minutes until we found Daniel standing motionless beside a huge tree. His face was pale. "Where were you?" Mark asked. Daniel didn't answer. He simply pointed upward. Hanging from the branches above him was a backpack. It was Daniel's backpack. But he was still wearing his own backpack. We immediately decided to return to camp. Daniel walked behind us without saying anything. When we reached the clearing, Sona noticed something terrifying. There were 5 tents. We counted them again. 5. But we were only 5 people. "Maybe there were always 5, Ryan said. Nobody laughed. That afternoon, we packed everything and started walking toward the river where we believed our guide had left us. After almost an hour, we realized something was wrong. We had passed the same enormous tree 3 times. The tree had a deep circular mark carved into its trunk. Sona whispered, "We're going in circles." Then we heard a woman's voice from the forest. Sona, my wife froze. The voice sounded like her mother. She hadn't heard her mother's voice in years. Sona took 1 step toward the trees before I grabbed her hand. "Don't," I said. The voice came again, this time from behind us. "Sona, I'm here." We turned around. Nothing was there. We decided to keep moving. As evening approached, the forest became strangely dark. The insects stopped making noise. Even the river seemed silent. Then Daniel suddenly stopped walking. "Listen," he whispered. We all listened. From somewhere deep in the forest came the sound of dozens of people whispering at the same time. We couldn't understand the words, but one name became clear. David. Then another voice said, "Sona." We ran. We didn't care where we were going. We just wanted to get away. Eventually, we reached a clearing with an abandoned wooden structure. It looked like an old research station. We decided to stay there for the night. Inside, we found broken equipment, old notebooks, and photographs covered in dust. One photograph showed a group of explorers standing in front of the same building. On the back was a date from decades earlier. Daniel opened one of the notebooks and began reading. The final entry said, "The voices have learned our names. Never answer them. They are not people." Suddenly, something hit the wall outside. Everyone went silent. Then came 3 knocks on the wooden door. Knock. 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 Mark whispered, "Nobody open it." A voice answered from outside. "Mark?" Mark's face went white. It sounded exactly like his own voice. Then another voice called, "Ryan." Then Daniel. Then Sona. Finally, my own voice came from outside the door. "David, open the door." We backed away. The knocking became louder. Then the entire building shook. The windows rattled, and something moved across the roof. Sona started crying quietly. Suddenly, Daniel whispered, "Look at the photograph." I looked. In the old photograph, there had been 5 explorers. But now there were 6 figures. A dark figure stood behind them. And its face looked exactly like Daniel. We turned toward him. Daniel was staring at us with a strange expression. "You shouldn't have followed me," he whispered. Mark stepped backward. "What do you mean?" Daniel smiled. "I never came back from the tree." The lights from our flashlights suddenly went out. Complete darkness filled the room. Sona screamed. I reached for her hand, but something else grabbed it first. I pulled away immediately. A cold whisper touched my ear. "You finally found us." The lights came back. Daniel was gone. The door was still locked. Nobody understood how he disappeared. We spent the rest of the night sitting together until sunrise. When daylight finally entered through the broken windows, we ran toward the river. Hours later, we found our guide waiting near the edge of the forest. When he saw us, his face changed. "Where is the 5th person?" he asked. I told him Daniel was missing. The guide stared at us in silence. Then he slowly shook his head. "There were only 4 of you when you arrived," he said. I felt the blood drain from my face. "No. There were 5. Me, my wife, Mark, Ryan, and Daniel." The guide looked terrified. "David, I remember you, Sona, Mark, and Ryan. You were 4. Nobody spoke. We left the forest that day. We never went back. But sometimes, late at night, Sona and I hear footsteps outside our home. And every time, there are 5 sets of footsteps. 4 stop at the door. The 5th continues walking around the house. Last week, I heard Daniel's voice whisper from outside my bedroom window. "David, you left me in the Amazon." I looked at Sona. She was already awake. She whispered one sentence that I will never forget. "David, don't look outside." I didn't. But something knocked on the glass 3 times. Knock. 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 And then a voice whispered my name again. "My name is William, and I met Rita on Facebook almost 2 years ago." At first, she was just someone who reacted to my posts and occasionally sent me funny messages. Slowly, our conversations became longer. We talked about movies, music, childhood memories, and the strange things that happened during our days. Eventually, Rita became my girlfriend, even though we lived far away from each other. Because of the distance, video calls became an important part of our relationship. We usually called each other every night before sleeping. It became our routine. But one month, something strange happened. On the first night, Rita called me at exactly 11:11 p.m. I answered, and she was sitting in her bedroom, smiling. We talked normally for almost an hour. Before ending the call, she suddenly became serious and said, "William, promise me something." I asked what it was. She said, "If I ever call you from an empty room, don't ask me where I am." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She smiled and ended the call. The next night, she called again at exactly 11:11 p.m. Everything seemed normal. On the 3rd night, I noticed something strange behind her. Her bedroom door was slowly moving, even though there was no wind. "Rita, is someone there?" I asked. She turned around quickly. No, she looked nervous for a second, then continued talking. On the 4th night, her video suddenly froze. Her face remained completely still on my screen. I waited several seconds, thinking the internet connection had failed. Then her frozen image smiled. I immediately ended the call. A few seconds later, Rita sent me a message. "Why did you hang up?" I stared at the message. I hadn't told her what happened. On the 5th night, I asked her about it. She said she didn't remember the call freezing. Then she asked me something strange. "William, did you see the person behind me?" I said no. She replied, "Good." Then she changed the subject. On the 6th night, we were talking normally when I heard a faint tapping sound coming from her side of the call. Tap, tap, tap. I asked Rita about it. She said she couldn't hear anything. The tapping continued. Then it stopped. On the 7th night, Rita didn't answer my call. I tried again and again. Finally, at 11:11 p.m., she called me. Her face appeared on the screen, but the room behind her was completely dark. "Rita, turn on the light," I said. She looked confused. "The light is already on." I looked carefully. She was right. Her face was illuminated, but everything behind her looked unnaturally dark. Then I noticed something in the corner. A tall shadow seemed to be standing there. I told her about it. She turned around. Nothing was there. When she looked back at the camera, the shadow was closer. I ended the call. The next morning, Rita messaged me that she had barely slept. She told me something had been happening in her apartment. Every night at 11:11 p.m., she heard someone walking outside her bedroom door. On the 8th night, we decided not to video call. Instead, we sent messages. At exactly 11:11 p.m., Rita sent me a message saying, "It's here again." I asked what she meant. She replied, "Someone is knocking." Then another message arrived. 3 knocks. I called her immediately. She answered. "Don't open the door," I said. She told me she wasn't going to. We stayed connected through the call while listening. Then the knocking stopped. A few seconds later, Rita whispered, "William, there's someone behind me." I told her not to turn around. She slowly moved the phone's camera toward the empty room. Nothing appeared. Then her screen suddenly went black. The call ended. I tried calling her back, but there was no answer. 10 minutes later, she sent me a message, "I'm okay." I asked what happened. She didn't reply. The 9th night was even stranger. Rita called me at 11:11 p.m., but she wasn't speaking. She was simply staring into the camera. "Rita?" I said. She remained silent. Then she slowly raised her hand and pointed behind me. I turned around. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the phone, Rita was gone from the screen. Her bedroom was empty. I could hear her voice, but it sounded distant. "William, don't trust the video." The call disconnected. I didn't sleep that night. On the 10th day, I decided to investigate. I checked our old Facebook messages and discovered something strange. Rita had never sent me her exact home address. Whenever I asked, she changed the subject. I searched through her old posts. Most of them had disappeared. Even her profile picture was different. I called her during the afternoon. She answered immediately. "Why are you looking through my Facebook?" she asked. Her voice sounded frightened. I asked her to tell me the truth. She stayed silent for several seconds. Then she said, "William, tomorrow is the 11th day." I asked what that meant. She whispered, "The 11th call is different." Before I could ask anything else, she ended the call. The 11th night arrived. At exactly 11:11 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Rita's name. I answered. Her face appeared on the screen. She was sitting in the same bedroom. But something was wrong. Her eyes were fixed on the camera. "William," she whispered, "you shouldn't have answered." Suddenly, the camera moved by itself. It turned toward the bedroom door. The door was open. Behind it was a dark hallway. Then I heard footsteps. Rita started crying. "It's coming. Leave the room." Rita's face disappeared from the screen and was replaced by a black screen with one sentence, "You were the 11th person." The call ended. I immediately searched Rita's Facebook profile. It was gone. Her Messenger account was gone too. I called her phone. The number no longer existed. I contacted Facebook support and checked our old conversations. Everything connected to Rita had disappeared except one message from 2 years earlier. It simply said, "If I ever call you from an empty room, don't ask me where I am." I had forgotten that message until that night. A week later, I received another Facebook friend request. The profile had no photograph, no posts, and no friends. The name was Rita. I didn't accept it. The next night, my phone rang at exactly 11:11 p.m. I didn't answer. It stopped. Then my messenger notification appeared. One new message. I opened it. It contained only 3 words, "Day 12 begins."